Okay, we're going to try to make your first Java program ever. In this class, we use an IDE called, I don't know if I'm doing anything, it's called BlueJ. So go to Start. Somehow find BlueJ on your computer. It's a software program for us. And if you open up BlueJ, you will probably not get exactly what I get right here. But if you need to pause this right now, you'll probably be totally blank project the first time you do this. But this is a software program that allows you to create software, kind of ironic. But we're going to click on Project and go to New Project. And you can call this whatever your first Java program or whatever you want to call it. I'm calling it my Chapter 2, 3 online notes. You can call the project whatever you want. Just make sure you save it in a spot, especially on your home directory would be great. For these computers, make sure you put it in the right spot. So I'd actually put it in the right spot first and then rename it down here to get your first one created. Once you get there, that didn't work because I already have one there. It should look like this. So once you create a project and you have it saved in the right spot where you want to create something, you should have something that kind of looks like this right here. All right, this document don't worry about right now. We're trying to make our first program ever, so we're going to go to New Class. So we create a new class. When we give the class a name, we can really call it anything we want, except for it has to follow Java conventionalities for variables, which we don't really know yet. So the only thing I'm going to tell you right now is the class name should start with a capital letter. So I'm going to call this Hello, and you can do the same thing. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about these radio buttons yet. It's just a normal class, so we'll always keep it on class and click OK. Now the cool thing about BlueJ, it's this wonderful IDE that helps you teach programming a little bit, is it sets up visuals for you. This little box is the program itself, so if you double left click on this, it'll open up all this nonsense. Now eventually all of this will be great because we'll hopefully use all of this, but for right now I'm going to have you highlight all of it and just get rid of it, and we're going to start from scratch. I like you to start from scratch the first time you do it. So we're going to type in public class hello. Now it's trying to highlight things for us. Hit enter, start a curly brace right there. And then every time I open a curly brace, I like to hit enter or go to a new line and then close the curly brace. And then click somewhere next to it and hit enter, and it automatically tabs over, and now I have this box set up. This is called the class header. We have some curly braces, no big deal. Java is case sensitive. If you do not capitalize something correctly, everything here has to look exactly the way I have it, including case sensitivity. All right, then we're going to type in public static void main parentheses, not a curly, just a regular parentheses. Remember, these over here were curly ones. And then capital S string, the two square brackets. Those square brackets are located next to the P on your keyboard. And then it doesn't really matter what here. We'll put ARGS there, end the parentheses, hit enter, start a curly brace. And then again, every time we start one, we want to get used to ending it, so we can hit enter again and close it. And then I like to click and hit enter in between, and I set that up. Now BlueJ, sorry, is setting up this wonderful little boxes for us to try to help us organize our work. But if you need to pause the video now to make sure everything looks exactly the way I have it there, be very careful of the parentheses. These are regular parentheses, these are square brackets, and these are curly braces over here. So these are curly, and this is a curly one, and this is a curly one as well. So be careful of all of that. Then we're going to put our first line of code. So in that yellow box, we'll do system.out.println. I'm going to slow that down for you again. This has to be a capital S. println, not a 1. First time I programmed, I thought that was a 1. That's an L right there. And then start a parentheses, double quotes, and then it doesn't matter what we'll put in here. We'll put in hello world, and the double quotes, another parentheses, and a semicolon. Every executable line of code in Java needs to end with a semicolon. These are headers, so they don't need semicolons. And there it is. All right, you want to make sure everything looks exactly the way that I have it right there if you want to run this for the first time. If you now this is just words. It's called source code. It doesn't do anything unless we get it into machine code. So if we click compile, what Java does, which you should have learned in the first chapter, is it translates this into bytecode right now. So all of this has been translated into bytecode, and we'll look at that in a second. But if you, like mine down here at the bottom, mine says no syntax errors. Yours may say, oh, you have some syntax errors. Mine does not. So let's suppose I capitalize the S in static right now and I compile this. It'll try to figure out the error for me. It won't say, hey, that S should be lowercase. You have to try to figure it out. So very, very frustrating. That's where the syntax gets very frustrating to beginning programmers. So please don't let it frustrate you. I'll do the best I can to try to help you out with that. But everything has to look exactly the same. Click compile, and it should say no syntax errors. So if you need to pause the program, try to see if you can get to do this, do that now. Once you have no syntax errors, I'm going to have you close out of this area, and it should take you back to the project view, which is this. And to run a program in BlueJ, you right-click on the brown box, and there shouldn't be any more lines on the brown box besides these two. We right-click on it, and then pull down to this void main thing. And then just click OK. And there is our first program. The program prints hello world to the screen. This is called the terminal window in BlueJ. We're going to learn a lot about the different aspects of BlueJ today. Remember, we're programming in Java, but we're using BlueJ to help us. All right, so there's our first program. We're going to close out of that. That's the output or the terminal window. I'm going to close out of that. Get back to this. This is the project view. If I want to go edit my code again, I double left click on this brown box, and it opens up my code again. If I wanted to do another line of code here, I'd say system.out.println. Where does this show up type of thing. So we're just throwing some words down. Hopefully you realize now that if you do system.out.println, which I'll call print line, that's what it stands for, that will make something show up on the terminal window. So if I compile this again, it says no syntax errors. I close. I right click on this. I pull down to void main. I click OK. And it says hello world. Where does this show up? Now yours may be showing two hello worlds. So I want to kind of talk about that once you get there. Is you can change the options of the terminal window. Right now, mine is set, and I think the default is clear screen at method call, but maybe it's not. So I'm going to uncheck that just to show you what it does. You don't have to do this. Just kind of watch along with what I do. I'm going to run the program again. And notice it's showing the previous run and this run. And if I ran the program one more time, it keeps showing the previous runs. And maybe that's something that you want. Maybe you want to see what did it do as you're debugging something. You're trying to figure out what did it do, and after I made this change, what does it do now? So maybe you want to see the previous run program. So the time I just ran it was, just right here. This is this run, and these are all the previous runs that I did. Most of the time in this class, you don't want those up. You just want a clean piece of paper every time you run the program, or a clean terminal window. So I always say have this have this checked. Clear screen at method call check. So you want that to be checked right there, because then it allows you to. The other thing that I would suggest you click on, which is probably not on, is unlimited buffering, and that allows the window to be infinitely, or the terminal window to be infinitely large. It'll just keep going forever and ever and ever if you have lots and lots and lots of output, which we won't have for a long time, but if you want to have that checked, that would be great as well. All right, so that's the terminal window. Let's go back in here, and we're just going to talk about it on your notes, and you should have some notes sitting there. So if I pull these up, we're going to start talking about all these different pieces here: the syntax error, the logic error, and the runtime error, the three that I'm going to try to get through, and these two things as well. So we'll try that. So I'm going to try to maybe put these next to each other so you can see them. All right, first of all, a syntax error in your notes, and you should have these out, and you can write comments down in your notes as you go through, is anything that I do wrong in the coding, like what I had before. If I capitalize something that's not supposed to be capitalized and I click compile, it's going to say, I don't even know what you're talking about. There's a syntax error. I can't figure this out. So syntax, meaning there's something wrong, or Maybe you forget a semicolon. So over here, if I deleted this semicolon and then compiled it, now this one it actually figured out for me. I mean, BlueJ is trying to figure out your errors for you, and it says, hey, you've got to have a semicolon there. I don't know what to do. So we got to put a semicolon there. So syntax, meaning the rules of the language. You know, that could be misspelling something that also is like right up here. I put PRINTLN and try to compile it. It says I can't find this symbol. It tries to figure things out for you. It's not going to tell you exactly what your error is, which I know will get frustrating, but it does the best it possibly can. So a syntax error is an error that it finds at compile time. When you compile, it'll say an error, and the program will not even run if there's a syntax error. So if you want to write something over here in your notes, that'd be great, of what a syntax error is, something to deal with, you know, something wrong with the code that it won't even compile, and the compiler finds it at compile time. A logical error was, let's suppose I'm trying to say hello world, and I forget the O in world, and I compile this, and it says, hey, you're still good, because this is not a command, this is output, but there's something wrong with the output. But I don't know it, or the computer doesn't know it, I should say. And then when you go to run the program, you know, you have to check it. It doesn't say, hey, there's an error here, you misspelled something. You have to find that error. A logical error is something that you did wrong in the program, either in the output or in a calculation. Maybe you're trying to calculate the area of a rectangle and you calculate the perimeter instead. The computer's not going to find that. You have to find those errors. So logical errors, if you need to put down something for those notes, is something that you have to find. A logical error, computer does not find. You find at runtime by testing your code with different data, trying to find all the logical errors that could be there. And we're going to spend a lot of time with that this year in doing that. And the last one is a runtime error. Runtime error is a little bit different. A runtime error is when it blows up at runtime itself. I can't really give you a great example of it until we learn more about it. Let's try this. System.out.println, and I'm going to take the number 3 and divide it by the number 0 and compile this, and it says, hey, you're great. This will work out great. But hopefully you know that 3 divided by 0, because there's nothing wrong with the syntax. The division symbol is right, everything, we haven't learned that yet, but everything's good, everything's spelled correctly. There's no missing semicolons, so that you followed the rules of the language. But when we go to run this thing now, I'll get what is called a runtime exception, which is down here. So now it opens up the code and says arithmetic exception. It tried to divide by 0. You can't divide by 0. So when the computer tried to do that, it blew up not at compile time, but at runtime, because it wasn't a syntax error. It was some sort of runtime error that blows up at runtime, or I call it blows up at runtime. So we're going to have different ones of those throughout the year, but that's a runtime exception. So there's 3 different types of errors that you have over here. Again, we have a syntax error, a logical error, and a runtime error. You should know the difference between them. Syntax error, the computer finds at runtime, or excuse me, at compile time. It won't even compile, and it won't even run. A logical error, you as the programmer have to find. That's, you know, calculation error, something like that. And then a runtime error is the computer will find, but it will not find it until runtime, and it blows up the program at that time. Now, eventually, we'll catch those errors so it doesn't blow it up. It'll be all sorts of fun. All right. And then the last thing I'm going to try to talk about is this .java file versus .class file. If you go look at where your programs are stored right now, and I'm going to try to find mine in here. Chapter 2, 3 online notes 2. If you look in here, where this is actually stored, where the programs, the package file, don't worry, that's a BlueJ file. But this first one just says hello, and it says a type .java file. That is all the source code. If I open that up, that would be opened up in a simple text editor. That would just be all the words that I typed in. The .class file that you see up here, and don't worry about this one right now, but the .class file, the only 2 I want to talk about is the difference between the .java file and the .class file. The .java file is the source code. Those are the words that you programmed, or that we programmed. The .class file is once we hit compile, that compile button in BlueJ creates a new file that takes this source code and converts it to bytecode. This hello.class is bytecode right now. It is in bytecode. Remember, that can't be run by a computer either until it gets transformed to machine code, but that will be done, or transferred to ones and zeros. So this is not ones and zeros, that's the bytecode. But this, very important to put in your notes, this is the stuff. The .class file is what gets embedded in HTML documents, or which gets sent across the internet. The bytecode comes across the internet, remember, from chapter 1, and then the JVM takes that bytecode and then transfers it to its machine code. So that .class file is the bytecode, and the .java file is the source code. It's just good to know those things. So maybe you want to embed your program inside of an HTML document. You would put this file in that HTML document because that's the bytecode. All right. I think that's all I got for that, and we'll move on here in a little bit. But that's a simple. If you want to play with your program, you can do that. Probably be a good idea right now to get the problems file and see if you can find all the syntax errors. Actually, let me show you that on the Google Drive. If you go to the Google Drive again, and there is in the chapter 2.3, there's this problems document here. If I open that up, just copy all of this, and actually I'll show you how to do this. Let's do this right now. I'm going to select all of this. So Control A is a shortcut for selecting all, and then copy that somehow. So Control C will copy. Go back to your BlueJ project that you have set up here. Make a new class and just call it, it looks like the name of the class right here was called Problems. So I'm just going to call it Problems. Then we're going to double click to open it up, but we'll delete it all out of there. And then the thing that we had copied from over here, remember we copied, we're just going to paste it in here. So now if I Control V, which is Velcro, it'll take this and actually put it in the format of BlueJ itself. And now, so anytime this year I want to give you programs, I'll put them on the Google Drive this way, and you will copy and paste them into classes, just like I did. To kind of slow that down again, remember, create a new class, name it something, delete everything out of it, and then paste this in there. This is a fun little activity that you can do right now, and this is to check, see if you can find all the errors, because if I try to compile this right now, or if I open it up and try to compile it, it'll say there's errors, and you're going to try to fix all of those errors. Now we haven't got quite to all those things yet, but it's kind of fun to work on. All right, have fun.